Hi, welcome to the Boca Voice and Fact or Fiction Friday. I'm here today with George Sigalos, who's been here in Boca Raton for close to 30 years. He's chair of Blue PAC, as well as a practicing attorney here in Boca Raton. George, thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me again, Peter. I appreciate it.
Well, George, as you know, we're going through just a tremendous time here in Boca Raton with, a turbulent time with us having a legal issue here in Boca. It's, kind of a very interesting time. We have a mayor that's been brought up on criminal charges. And with that, there's some procedural and some technical things that are going on. And I thought it would be great to have you come on and talk about what are some of the things procedurally that are happening both on the state and the local level that are happening here in Boca Raton.
Sure. Well, and just to clarify, I've been in Boca for 30 years practicing law. I have not been Blue PAC chair for that long,
okay,
only a few years on that. Yeah, well, it is very complicated. I mean, there's state statutes that govern these situations, and it's an unusual situation to have the sitting mayor or sitting council person indicted or charged with any sort of criminal offense related to their duties while in office. But Florida statute governs that situation. It's Florida statute section 112.51. And basically, it provides that where an elected or appointed municipal official is arrested for a felony or for a misdemeanor related to their duties in office, or for commission of a crime while in office related to their office, the governor has the power to suspend the municipal official from office. And in this case, Governor Scott did that just a few days after the sitting mayor of Boca Raton was charged criminally with certain offenses. So there's a suspension procedure. In that case, then, what happens is you have to see if depending on the municipality, in this case Boca Raton, does the city charter have provisions for dealing with a vacancy like that, even though it's a temporary vacancy. And the state statute says that it's basically treated as though it's a permanent vacancy, even though it's not permanent yet. It's got to be treated as a vacancy that has to be filled at some point. And so you default to the state's law defaults to the city charter at that point to decide what's the procedure for filling that vacancy. If there is no procedure in the city charter, then the governor would have to make a temporary appointment to fill this slot. But that's not what happened here, because we do have provisions in the city charter to deal with that.
Okay. So as we talk about this, there's going to be some things that are going to happen. What happens if Susan fights this, and I know she's going to. I mean, she's come out publicly and said she's going to fight this. She's vindicated, and she's found not guilty.
Right. Well, the state statute that I just cited addresses that situation. If the charges are dropped, or they are, the way the statute reads says, if they're acquitted or found not guilty, or is otherwise cleared of the charges which were brought, then they're entitled to full reinstatement. In other words, the suspension has to immediately end, and they're back in their same position as whatever position they were removed from, as mayor in this case. And they're entitled to back pay, et cetera, et cetera. But they're only entitled to be reinstated to their position up to the remaining portion of the unexpired term. Okay. So if this drags out and the mayor's term expires before this is concluded, favorably to her, if it is concluded that way, then they don't go back to their old seat. They're entitled to back pay up to the point their term expired, but they don't get reinstated because the term is expired in any event. If it happens before the expiration of the term, and I think at this point the mayoral election was in March of 17, right. So we're a little less than 2 years left. If there's an acquittal or charges are dropped in a shorter period of time, then she would be reinstated.
Okay.
And that's what would happen there.
Now, we also have a seat open as well. So
but let me also point out, too, one other thing.
Sure.
If there's anything other than acquittal or charges dropped, if there's a conviction or even a no contest plea, then that official is completely terminated. The governor then has to remove them from the office. Okay, so we're in a limbo period here to see what happens.
Well, that brings up another question then, okay, because you almost have like a musical chairs going on right now.
Right.
Right? So
we hear.
So we have the deputy mayor that has gone from one seat into acting acting mayor. So Scott Singer has gone over to acting mayor, and which has left his seat open. And they've made a decision right now to only run as four council members, leaving one seat open. So with that being said, with only four, and they have, you said, what does the statute now lead to having to what they do now for those seats?
Well, that's a good question, Peter. As I said earlier, now, because we do have a provision in the city charter that deals with these types of vacancies, we now go back and look at the city charter for what happens here now, once the governor has suspended the official. And under the city charter, yes, the acting mayor becomes the deputy mayor becomes acting mayor, and that happened. Obviously, Scott Singer was the deputy mayor. As soon as Susan Haynie was suspended by the governor, he assumed the role of acting mayor in that seat. His seat is technically open now as a council member under the charter, and the charter is, I think it's section 3.08 of the city charter that deals with that. So his seat is now technically open, and that can be filled either by appointment by the remaining council members, including the now acting mayor voting on that issue. And if they can't agree within a certain period of time, I think it's a couple meetings, there has to be a special election held, and that would be for that open seat. Likewise, for the mayor, they can have a special election for the mayoral seat at this point. But that, again, that would be only to fill the remaining term of the mayor who's been suspended. So in March of 2020, that sitting mayor, whether it's the deputy now acting mayor or a replacement by a special election, that mayoral term will end as scheduled.
So I'm going to throw this one out at you. So let's say the city council decides to go ahead and run a special election. They run the special election, they elect a new mayor. Susan is now found innocent. Okay. The governor now has to and she's innocent. What happens? Does the new mayor now sit as the new mayor, or does Susan now come back in place?
Well, no. Susan Haynie, if she is acquitted or otherwise cleared of the charges while her term remains, the governor then has by law to reinstate her. He has to reinstate her, and she goes back to her seat as mayor with full back pay and benefits, whatever those are, for the remaining term. So the person who succeeded as temporary acting mayor or as special election replacement mayor is no longer the mayor. If a sitting city council member such as Mr. Singer is acting not in a special election, but as I understand it, is acting as the acting mayor, which he is now, before there's any special election, he's entitled to go back to his original seat.
But how about if they fill that seat? But how about if they fill that seat?
If the mayor is reinstated.
But how about if they fill that seat? Because if he releases that seat to run for that, and they fill that seat, now they have 5 city council members.
I believe this. The charter is a little, it's a little confusing, but I believe that seat reverts back to the person who had the seat. In this case, Mr. Singer.
So odd man out.
Right. Unless he resigns that seat to run for mayor in a special election for mayor, then he no longer has a right to go back to that seat.
So technically, if Scott gave up that seat, he could be in jeopardy.
Well, I don't know in jeopardy, but he certainly, if he resigns to run for mayor for this remaining term, Susan Haynie, then he would no longer have the entitlement to go back to his original seat for the remaining term of that seat, because he has to resign by law to run for that seat.
Right.
So that's the way I interpret it. I hope I'm right, but that's the way I
no,
see
listen, we're definitely uncharted territories. Yeah. It's definitely a complicated.
Right. And I would certainly defer to certainly lawyers who are specialists in election law.
No, I got it.
And the city attorney. And the city attorney actually gave a very good presentation on this issue a few weeks ago, right after these events occurred, and explained to people who attended the meeting what the process is. And it was pretty well explained, but it's a very, very complicated scheme.
Right. So what are your thoughts in regards to when we're looking at some of these processes and what's going on and where we have to go from here. I mean, obviously the city has to do a little bit of healing too, right? Because it's certainly, no one thought we were going to be here, right? So when you're looking at some of these processes and where we're going, what are your overall thoughts?
Well, again, this is a very unusual situation. I don't think anyone in Boca Raton in recent memory can recall this type of a situation having happened. So, as you said, we're in uncharted waters, but I think the city charter lays out the pathway to fill these vacancies during the remaining terms of the mayor and the city council seat that is now vacant because of the acting mayor the deputy mayor becoming acting mayor. So we're in uncharted territory, but I think it's going to be fairly well played out. I don't think there's going to be any litigation over it. It seems to be a fairly well documented charter and path to how you deal with these issues and how you navigate these issues.
Well, George, I can't thank you enough as coming on. I know as Blue Pack chair, you know, you're in the middle of a lot of this stuff on both on a state and federal level as well, because you get involved in some of the things going up in D.C. as well as in Tallahassee.
Certainly on the state level we do, definitely, and the local level we don't really advocate. The Blue Pack does not advocate in federal elections, but obviously we certainly keep our ear to the ground on those issues. That's for sure.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming and explaining this. I know that a lot of our listeners are constantly looking at, you know, what's going on, and you know, too often I think we get caught up in the minutia of the who rather than the what. And I think this explains a little closer as to the process versus getting involved into, you know, the who's sitting in the seat. And I think we really need to look at exactly this, the process, and take the who out of it, because this makes it a little less complicated.
Right. Well, we'll be hearing more about the who's in the near future.
Yes, we will. Thank you so much. Thank you for watching Fact or Fiction Friday and the Boca Voice. We appreciate it and look forward to seeing you soon.